Okay, so we are going to talk now a little bit. Hopefully everyone is back and joining. We're going to talk a little bit about building applications and deploying them as well. So to start off, I will be creating a brand new application from scratch on my local machine, because that's something that we haven't done in this workshop yet. We did it in the last workshop in the first session, which is available on GitHub, and you can find the code and the documentation there. But I'm going to go ahead and just demonstrate it since it's been asked a couple times now. So you should see my screen here now. On the left side, I have Visual Studio Code, and on the right side, I have a terminal. So I'm going to go ahead and in this terminal, I'm going to go to just a directory. So random directory. There's nothing in here. I'm going to go ahead and delete that test. Doesn't really matter. Oh man, that was a big test. Okay, so how do I start to a brand new DHIS2 application in a local environment? So this is not using Code Sandbox. How do I get started? This is something that we talked about in the last workshop, so it's going to be a review. I'm going to go through it very quickly. But first things first, I would recommend installing the DHIS2 CLI. You can do that where you have to have yarn and node installed locally, but then you can run yarn global add at dhis2/CLI. And that will install DHIS2 CLI on your local machine. Goes through a bunch of different things and does this. Some of these peer dependencies are false positive warnings, so don't worry about those. But now we have DHIS2 CLI installed locally, which gives us this command. It's called D2. So D2 has a bunch of stuff going on inside of it that I've talked about in, I think, one of the webinars. I went over D2 and what you can do with it. One of the interesting ones is you can actually create DHIS2 instances and run them locally in Docker. I'm not going to do it now, but you could run D2 cluster up, and then you give it a name. We're going to say dev. We're going to say DHIS2 version, or let's say, yeah, version is going to be 234. We're going to say DB version 234. We can tell it to seed the database and to update to get the latest version of that thing. So there's a lot of different commands that you can use here. You look at the DHIS2 CLI, which is linked from developers at dhis2.org. But you could then spin this up to have a 234 version of DHIS2 running locally that you could test against. You could also spin up a 233, a 232, a 235 to be able to test against all those different versions and make things generic, as Hendrik introduced or recommended on Wednesday. And then you could even build some automated tests against those systems if you wanted to, using this tool, which it goes in line with what Jan Gerke was introducing yesterday. That's a little bit more advanced, but that's kind of the ideal world, is you would be able to automatically test against multiple live versions of DHIS2 in a consistent and automated way. And this is one way to do that, but it's also useful for doing manual testing. So that's one thing that D2 can do, but what we're going to talk about today is D2 App Scripts Init. So I'm actually going to clear the screen. D2 App Scripts Init. And what this does is it creates a new DHIS2 application in a local directory. So I'm going to call it test app. So I give it a name, and it will create a directory called test app. It installs a bunch of things locally in that app. Lots of React script warnings. Under the hood, the CLI app scripts, or the app platform, does use Create React App for the moment. You shouldn't assume that you have a Create React App, because it might change in the future, but it does use that, so it's pretty robust and well understood. So now it says we have successfully created a new DHIS2 application. As it says down at the bottom there, we can do cd test app and yarn start. And this will start our brand new application. Oops. And it takes a couple minutes the first time, a few seconds. But there you have it. You have a local application that's running that has a very basic app already bootstrapped for you. It has the header bar. It has the ability to log into DHIS2 instances, et cetera, et cetera. And actually, if we logged out and then went back to our application, refreshed, it allows us to log into an instance. So I was already logged in on my local host, so that's why it logged in automatically. But normally when you first start your application, it should look like this. And then we can log into our server and we get this, this system. So, or this application. And this is loading the user's name from, the DHIS2 API. So it is making an API request. I'm going to go ahead and stop that server, clear this, and I'm going to open this in Visual Studio Code. So you can see on the left side here that these are the files that are currently bootstrapped into this application. So the main one that we'll look at today is this app.js, which, make this a little smaller so you can see it. This is exactly what we were seeing here. It uses a data query component, which is basically a wrapper around the use data query hook. It fetches a bunch of stuff and it runs locally. It fetches the name of the user and fills that into the HTML that's generated by this React component, as we saw in the instance that's running. This is exactly what we're seeing. So there's obviously a lot you can do with this, a lot more that we could edit and we could just get rid of this completely and then create our own application from here. I'm going to leave it just as is. I'm not going to edit it today. But this is basically, you're now in the situation that you would be in if you opened one of the Code Sandbox links. There are some things that you could do to improve this environment. You could add, if you go back to the first session of Workshop 1, you could add CLI style, which allows you to do prettier and ESLint for this application on an automated way, do some automated testing and other things as well. But this is basically a bootstrapped DHIS2 app platform application that you can use for whatever your needs are. So now let's see, how do we actually turn this into something that we can deploy to a DHIS2 instance? That's what we're going to talk mostly about today. So as we saw before, we ran yarn start, but that's going to start a development server, which isn't what we want to do. So instead, what we want to do is we want to run yarn build. If we run yarn build, it has another script similar to yarn start that basically builds a production application. Going through and doing this, it builds the app first, and then it builds the app shell, which is the wrapper that has the header bar and all the other things around it. And eventually, and you'll see also that here it's doing the internationalization that we talked about on Wednesday. So it's checking all of your source code for internationalization strings, like this welcome to DHIS2, for instance. It's pulling those out into the en.pot file. You could then translate it and generate the code for, or generate the translations for different languages, and it would automatically inject those into your application as well. So we built the test application, we built the app shell, we generated a manifest automatically, and then you'll see this last line here. It says creating app archive at build bundle DHIS2 test app 1.0.0.zip. 1.0.0 is the version that comes from package.json. So you'll actually get a the version from package.json is in the name of the zip file that's output, so that you always know which version you built. It also has the name of the application. And this includes things like the manifest file that's automatically generated. It includes things like the favorite icon, and the automatically does the naming of the application, the versioning of the application, and the manifest, and all of that. It then also zips it up in the right way. If you were to do this manually, it's a little bit complicated because you have to create what's called a flat zip file rather than one with a top level folder. You can do it manually. There's instructions in the documentation, but this makes it much, much easier. So now if we look in our build directory on the left here, we'll see that there are two directories under that got created. So app is the actual, the output of this build. So this is just the static files that are in exactly the same as what's inside the zip file that was made. So this has lots of things going on inside of it. It generates obviously the index.html. You have all of your JavaScript code, and this is actually bundle split so that different languages only will load the versions that are relevant from moment, things like that. You don't have to really worry about that, but that has all of your JavaScript code inside of it, all of your CSS, etc. Things like your browser config file, your manifest file, which has everything that you need, and the version and the name of the application and all of that. This is all automatically generated. So you could deploy, just like create a zip file from these files, and it would be the same as what's automatically created for you. But under the bundle, on the bundle side, bundle directory, you have also a pre-created .zip file. So it's called dhis2 test app 1.0.0.zip, has all of that inside of it. And that's exactly what we can upload to a dhis2 instance. So if I go to my dhis2 instance here, now I'm looking at the one for this academy. I can go to the app management app, and I can upload a new application. So you click that upload button, then I'm going to go to the place or the application that I just created, the Scratch test app. Under build and bundle, we have this zip file. I'm going to go ahead and click just open on that zip file. It uploads it, it installs it, and then we have that application running on our dhis2 instance, demo instance, as an installed application. So this is pretty powerful. It's a lot easier than the previous mechanisms for building and deploying applications to dhis2. And it should be pretty straightforward. Most things should just work for you out of the box. There are some more advanced things that you can do. You can build an app in standalone mode, which somebody was talking about the other day. That builds it so in a way that it doesn't assume that you are going to install it into a dhis2 instance. So it's similar to the development mode, where you actually get a pop-up that lets you put in a server URL and log into any server you want. But that's more advanced and not something that I would recommend because of the recent cookie changes in browsers. Let me see what else I wanted to cover here. That was mostly it. That's building and deploying an application to a dhis2 instance. Does anybody have any questions about that, about building an application locally or building a bundled zip file or deploying that to a dhis2 instance?
Hi, I was just wondering, would this apply to the Windows environment as well, or are there other provisions?
It should work on Windows as well. I will say that it's probably not as well tested on Windows because we don't have a lot of people that are running Windows that are using this at the moment. If there are bugs, it's possible that there are bugs, but it should work in a Windows environment. There's nothing that I know of that should not let it do that. And I believe some of the, Wahed maybe knows more, but I believe some of the students from the UIO course that was doing this are using Windows as well.
Yeah, this worked without. Continue.
No, it's just acknowledging.
Hi, Austin. Thank you for this detailed quick demo of developing and installing the custom app. I'm very happy to see this demo.
Sure.
But my challenge here is, I would say it's a challenge. I am using a Windows machine for the local development, though my production server is actually working on the Linux. So I'm a bit lost on the initial steps of doing that CLI, DHIS to CLI, and these things. I'm just wondering, this is it like a GitHub we have downloaded, you have downloaded and already have something like a code sandbox? Those things are a bit confusing to me. Otherwise, these steps are clean and very clear.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up some documentation here. Wahed, did you want to say anything about Windows or the course?
Yeah, most of the D2 CLI stuff works fine on Windows as well. And building, that's the same for Linux or Windows. It's running in the browser, so JavaScript works the same in Windows and Linux or whatever.
Yeah. So the two requirements that I mentioned are Node, so nodejs.org, and you can download it for macOS, but you can also download it for Windows, for instance. I don't need this on my machine, but you can do that. So you can install Node on Windows. You then install Yarn, yarnpkg.com. And this one, getting started, installation. Where's my installation? Global install. I don't think it recommends this. That's strange. I thought there was a way to download. I'll find the document or the place that I was looking for. But yeah, you can install that once you have it ready. I guess they're recommending the npm version now. But yeah, you can do npm install-g yarn if you want to install Yarn. You can also use a package manager if you wanted to, and those sorts of things, depending on your operating system. And once you have those two installed, that first command that I showed is all you need to install the CLI, the DHIS2 CLI. So you just do yarn global add at DHIS2/CLI. And that's also shown in the documentation. So if we go to developers.dhis2.org, go to docs, or not guides, docs. And then down here we have command line tools, or CLI, command line interfaces. The D2 is what we care about. You click on getting started, and then we have the instructions here, yarn global add at DHIS2/CLI. This should also work on Windows. So once you have Node and Yarn installed, you can just do yarn global add this, and then it should just work. And I've already done this, so I don't need to do it again. But then once you have that installed, you can do the D2 command. I would recommend that you use a Linux shell if it's possible on your Windows machine. I believe it also works on PowerShell, but I'm not sure. Wahed, do you know about that actually? I don't know.
I'm not sure. I recommended using Windows Subsystem for Linux last year.
Yeah. I would recommend that as well. Windows Subsystem for Linux is what it's called. If you have that available for Windows 10, I think, or later. Then you can basically run all of these commands exactly the same way on Windows. You can also use, so I use Visual Studio Code, and I believe you can, even on a Windows machine, you open the terminal down here, and it will let you do these D2 commands there as well. So that's another way to get to this. And it's a kind of integrated development environment. It's free, available online. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you. So basically, if I get it correctly, before installing the DHIS to Clay, I should have installed Node.js, yarn packaging, and npm. Like those are the prerequisites to do those things.
Yeah, and when you install Node, npm also gets installed, so you don't need to do both.
Okay.
It installs both at the same time. And I believe, so this is what I was looking for here. Yeah, so here are the steps to install, regardless of your operating system. You install Node.js, it has the link there. Then you install Yarn, it has the link there. And then you install a DHIS2 CLI, which is the command that I just showed you. And then once that's installed, you can use the D2 command on your command line. And then you run this script that I just talked about, D2 App Scripts Init. I'll pass this on Slack just so people have it. And then you can do all of these other things as well. Even if you don't have Yarn, if you skip the Yarn step and don't install the CLI globally, you can also just use this command here. So once you have Node installed, you can run npx this command, and then it will create your application for you. But I would recommend installing Yarn and using Yarn because it's cleaner, and we recommend using Yarn for your dependency management in Node projects or React projects.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you have other questions, think about them for a few minutes, because we'll take a quick 4 or 5 minute break. 5-minute break. So at 32 after the hour, we'll come back and Wahed will present a session about the App Hub and how to install things or deploy applications through the App Hub. And then we'll come back for a wrap up at around noon after that. So see you all back here in 5 minutes, and come up with, if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to share them or keep them in your mind so that you can ask them when we come back. Thanks, everybody.